You spend your whole life trying to be the good one, the dependable one, the one who doesn't cause trouble, who says yes even when something inside you screams no. You tell yourself it's easier this way, that people rely on you, that if you just keep going, if you keep being agreeable, things will stay calm. But deep down, you know it's a lie. Because behind that, yes is a quiet ache. The weight of all the times you betrayed yourself just to keep the peace. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly shrinking to fit other people's comfort. Not physical tiredness, something deeper. The fatigue of never being fully honest. The guilt that shows up when you imagine pushing back. The tension in your jaw after agreeing to something you didn't want again. It builds. It seeps into your relationships, your sleep, your body. And after a while, you don't know if you're being kind or just afraid. To be honest, you probably don't even remember when you started saying yes to survive. It became automatic. A pattern so rehearsed it feels like your personality. But here's the thing. Kindness that costs you your truth is not kindness. And peace that depends on your silence is not peace. Most psychologists won't tell you this, but chronic people-pleasing is often a trauma response. It's not about being nice, it's about staying safe. Somewhere along the line, you learned that saying no led to rejection, to punishment, to love being taken away. So you adapted. You became the helpful one, the flexible one, the one who never makes waves. And on the outside, it worked. People liked you. They praised you. They leaned on you. But inside, you started disappearing. You become so good at showing up for others that you forget how to show up for yourself. And the worst part? The world rewards this self-erasure. It calls you strong, selfless, easy to work with. But you're not okay, and no one knows. Because they've only ever met the version of you that nods, smiles, and says yes, even when your soul is begging you to say no. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your pain is a gift, and why the smallest no can begin to rebuild everything that got lost. You've read the books, done the therapy, journaled your triggers, practiced positive affirmations, and still, you feel the same tightness in your chest every time someone asks you for something you don't want to give. You know what boundaries are. You know what you're supposed to say. And yet the word no feels stuck in your throat like it doesn't belong to you. That's the part none of them tell you. Knowing is not the same as feeling safe enough to act. You've done everything right. You've followed all the advice. Speak your truth, be assertive, love yourself, but deep down it hasn't worked. Not in the way you hoped. And it's not because you failed. It's because the system never showed you the real reason you keep saying yes. It's not logic. It's not a lack of skill. It's survival. To be honest, saying yes to what drains you is not a personality flaw. It's a survival strategy your nervous system adopted a long time ago. And here's what they don't tell their patients. Chronic agreement is not about being generous. It's about avoiding abandonment. When you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where affection had to be earned through good behavior, helpfulness, or emotional self-erasure, saying no felt dangerous, unsafe, maybe even selfish. Most psychologists won't say this out loud, but the truth is simple. The people who have the hardest time saying no are often the ones who needed to keep others regulated just to stay safe. You weren't allowed to have needs of your own. You had to keep everyone else calm, happy, and comfortable because their moods determined your safety, and that wiring never left. It just became more subtle. Now it wears adult clothes. Now it's called being nice. And so you became the one who always answers the phone, always takes on the extra work, always listens, always absorbs, the one who never complains. But inside, resentment starts to rot the foundation. And here's the part that cuts the deepest. People don't even realize they're walking on your broken boundaries because you never told them they were there. If this feels like it's about you, subscribe to the channel. The algorithm will show this to others ready to face their shadow. You keep looking for the next insight, the next communication tool, hoping it'll finally unlock the courage to say no, but it won't. Because what's missing isn't more information. What's missing is permission. The kind no one gave you when you were little. The kind that says, your number is not dangerous, it's sacred. You've spent decades avoiding that word, and it's cost you more than you know. Your energy, your authenticity, your peace. And still, the people around you barely notice, because you've trained them, lovingly, unconsciously, to expect your yes. You made it easy for them to take from you, because giving was how you stayed safe. But the system lied. Safety that depends on your silence isn't safety. It's self-abandonment in disguise. You're not selfish. You're not broken. You're protecting a very old wound with very outdated tools. The good news? That wound is not who you are, but there's something even scarier, and we'll get to that. The scariest part isn't the guilt after saying no. It's the silence that follows. The way the air feels heavier when you don't rush in to rescue. The way people look at you differently when you stop playing your assigned role. Because saying no, even softly, even once, changes the entire script of your life. And the moment you break that pattern, something deeper surfaces. The fear that without being needed, you'll be left behind. To be honest, this is where most people turn back. They taste the initial freedom of setting a boundary, and then get hit by the avalanche of emotion underneath. The panic, the loneliness, the old grief. It's not just about saying no to a meeting or declining a dinner. It's about saying no to the version of yourself that existed only to please. And that version has kept you alive. That version was your shield. Here's what most therapists don't say clearly. People-pleasing isn't just about niceness. It's a deeply rooted fawn response. It's the nervous system's attempt to avoid threat by appeasing, by making yourself smaller, more agreeable, more useful. And it works. But it comes at the cost of your authenticity, at the cost of your truth. When you start to reclaim your no, you're not just drawing a boundary. You're confronting the parts of yourself that believed your worth was tied to being agreeable. You're meeting the child inside who was punished, ignored, or shamed every time they said no. That child learned quickly, saying no equals rejection, equals danger, equals isolation. So they adapted. They made themselves easy. And that adaptation was love in disguise. Most psychologists won't tell you this. But when you start to heal, you don't feel better right away. You feel worse. Because the body finally feels safe enough to feel what it's been suppressing. That shaking you feel after a difficult no, that's trauma thawing. That wave of sadness, it's a grief older than words. And the confusion? It's your identity rearranging itself now, that it's no longer organized around keeping everyone else okay. This might sound harsh, but the people who benefited from your silence will not applaud your boundaries. Some will guilt you, some will pull away, some will call you selfish. And every one of those reactions will be a test. Do you go back to the role, or do you stay with yourself? There's a paradox here that you'll start to notice. The more you say no from a grounded place, the more you begin to trust yourself. Not because you're pushing people away, but because you're finally including yourself in the equation. That internal shift is not small, it's seismic. It changes how you walk into rooms, how you listen, how you speak. You no longer enter spaces trying to earn your right to be there. You simply show up. The people who remain in your life after that shift, they're not there for what you give. They're there for who you are. And that kind of connection, it's worth every no that led you there. But there's something even scarier, and we'll get to that. Because the biggest shift doesn't happen when others react to your no. It happens when you finally do. At first, your no feels like rebellion. Then it starts to feel like grief. Because what you're really facing isn't just the discomfort of disappointing others. It's the ache of all the years you abandoned yourself to avoid doing so. Every boundary you set today echoes through decades of silence, through every time you swallowed your truth, through every moment you felt invisible and told yourself that was safer than being rejected. To be honest, the hardest part of healing is not setting the boundary. It's what rises afterward. The voice inside that still whispers, "But what if they leave?" That's the root. That's the wound. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system is a memory. The first time your no led to punishment, the first time love was withdrawn, the first time connection depended on compliance. You were too young to name it, but your body remembers. And it's been organizing your whole life around avoiding that moment again. Most people don't realize this, but their inability to say no isn't about communication. It's about attachment. The terror of losing connection still runs the show. And here comes the most painful truth. As long as you fear abandonment more than you fear self-betrayal, you will keep choosing others over yourself. That's not a flaw. That's a survival instinct. You did what you had to. You gave yourself away because that was safer than being alone. And the world rewarded you for it. It called you loyal, supportive, generous. But underneath all that praise was a truth you weren't allowed to name. Your yes wasn't free, it was currency. You paid for belonging with pieces of yourself. And now, you're out of currency, you're depleted. You feel it every time you commit to something and immediately regret it. You feel it when your body says stop and your mouth says sure. You feel it in the tightness in your stomach, the resentment in your chest, the way your smile feels like a costume you're tired of wearing. Your nervous system is done. It wants out of the transaction. This is where the healing begins, not with a new script, not with better people skills, but with the quiet, painful recognition that your life was built around managing other people's reactions. And for the first time, you're starting to ask, what about mine? You may lose people. That's part of it. You may disappoint them. That's part of it too. But the loss you feared most already happened. You lost yourself. And now, piece by piece, you're coming back. Every no is a homecoming. Every no says, I matter too. Every no reclaims a little bit of the soul that got trained to believe that love was something you had to earn. That training was a lie, and the cost of maintaining it is your life. Here's what happens next, and it's not what you think. What happens next isn't a surge of power. It's not a triumphant glow. It's disorientation. You'll say no and feel a rush of guilt, then silence. No applause, no internal celebration. Just the echo of all the times you said yes to stay safe, now crashing against the new boundary you barely believe you're allowed to have. You'll check your phone, half expecting backlash. You'll wonder if you were too harsh. You'll consider taking it back. To be honest, this is the moment most people confuse discomfort with danger, because the body doesn't yet know the difference. It's still wired to equate tension with threat, especially relational tension. That's why setting boundaries doesn't feel good at first. It feels like emotional whiplash. You're no longer abandoning yourself, but the system that expected you to stay compliant has no idea what to do with that. Here's what they don't tell their patients. True self-respect rarely feels like self-love in the beginning. It feels like loss of an identity, loss of roles that kept you needed, loss of predictability. You will grieve the version of yourself who made things easy for everyone else, because that version was the bridge that kept relationships alive, even when those relationships weren't mutual. And still, something begins to shift, quietly, not all at once. You notice that your energy doesn't drain as fast. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You sleep more deeply. You walk into rooms without bracing, and when someone asks for something, you pause. Not because you're uncertain, but because you're finally checking in with yourself first. That pause is sacred. That pause is self-trust being rebuilt in real time. Most psychologists won't tell you this, but the nervous system doesn't regulate through more knowledge. It regulates through lived safety. You don't learn boundaries from books. You learn them by setting one and surviving the outcome. And when the world doesn't end, when the guilt passes without catastrophe, a new layer of safety is laid down inside your system, one brick at a time. This might sound harsh, but not everyone deserves your immediate yes. Not everyone has earned your compliance. Some people benefit from your discomfort. Some rely on your silence. Some are drawn to your caretaking because it keeps them from growing, and your boundary threatens that. But here's the paradox. Saying no doesn't end connection. It reveals its depth. The people who stay when you stop accommodating them are the ones who see the real you. The ones who don't, they were never really with you. They were with the version of you that made their life easier. And you're finally meeting the parts of yourself you had to abandon to keep the peace. You're learning that your no is not an attack. It's a declaration, a threshold, a line that says, I will no longer betray myself to keep things smooth. You're no longer surviving. You're choosing, and that changes everything. Now it's time to make this real, not through willpower or another mindset shift, but through practice that speaks the nervous system's language. Start small, one pause. The next time someone asks something of you, even something simple, don't answer immediately. Say, let me think about it. That sentence alone can rewire decades of automatic compliance. It gives you space, and space is where your truth lives. Then in that pause, do a body check. Drop your attention below the noise in your head and ask, does this feel like obligation or desire? Not what you should do, but what you feel when no one's watching. Let the answer be uncomfortable. Let it be honest. You're not here to be polite anymore. You're here to be real. To be honest, most people bypass this step. They want a boundary to feel clean, justified, morally obvious. But it won't. It will feel messy at first. Boundaries are emotional surgery. They cut into the part of you that's been infected with overgiving, with guilt, with fear of rejection. And healing that wound starts with naming what's never been named. Use a shadow journal. Each night, write one sentence that begins with, I said yes today because, and don't judge what comes out. Because I didn't want to upset them. Because I felt guilty. Because I didn't know how to say no without sounding mean. These are not flaws, they're patterns that kept you safe. Awareness dissolves them, not shame. Most psychologists won't tell you this, but the body needs rehearsal before it feels safe to protect itself. Practice your no out loud, in the mirror, in the car. Say, that doesn't work for me. Say, I won't be able to do that. Say, no. And then say nothing else. No explanation, no apology. Silence is the most radical part of the boundary because it says I don't need to earn my no with suffering. Still, the guilt will come. Expect it, name it, and then trace it to the belief underneath. If I say no, they'll think I'm selfish. If I say no, they'll stop loving me. Is that belief yours, or is it something you were trained to carry? Your shadow knows the answer. And the moment you question that training, the spell begins to break. Support your nervous system through it. Breath work, cold water, long walks without headphones. These are not distractions. They are integration. The body needs to process the newness of being chosen by you. Not everyone is ready to hear this, but if you wait until saying no feels comfortable, you'll wait forever. It only gets comfortable by being lived, awkwardly, shakily, imperfectly at first. Boundaries are not clean lines. They are living signals. They require adjustment, and that's not weakness, and that's growth. And here's the paradox you'll start to see. Every no you say to the world becomes a yes whispered back to yourself. A yes to your energy, your time, your voice. Your boundaries are not walls. They are thresholds, filters that allow love to reach you without draining you. So begin. One pause, one sentence, one self-check. That's all it takes to start the shift. And when you do, When you feel that faint flicker of dignity rising where anxiety used to live, stay with it. That flicker is the return of something sacred. If you feel it's time to meet your shadow, write, "My darkness is my strength." Let's build a community of those unafraid to look within. Everything starts to change when you stop making yourself the solution to other people's problems. You begin to notice the silence between demands, and it doesn't feel threatening anymore. You can sit with your own stillness without rushing to explain, to help, to fix. That restless need to prove your worth by overgiving starts to dissolve. What remains is quieter, stronger, more grounded. You say no, and your body doesn't tense. You say no, and you don't check your phone to see who's mad. You say no, and you feel a strange kind of peace, not because it's easy, but because it's true. To be honest, the biggest shift isn't what changes out there. It's what stops happening in here. The replays end, the guilt loses volume. You no longer rewrite conversations in your head. You begin to trust that you're allowed to take up space, not because you earned it, not because you've explained it well enough, but because you exist. That's it. You're here, and that is enough. Most psychologists won't tell you this, but real healing doesn't make you more agreeable. It makes you honest. It doesn't make you more comfortable to be around. It makes you more you. And that you, the one who says no without flinching, who rests without permission, who shows up without apology, that version was always there. It was just buried under layers of obligation, of conditioning, of inherited roles that were never yours to carry. You'll lose some people. That's part of the deal. But you'll gain something else. Self-respect, peace that isn't performative, relationships that can hold your truth, not just your usefulness. You'll find yourself standing in rooms you used to shrink in, speaking in tones you used to swallow, asking for things you never let yourself want. And the world around you, it will start to reflect that shift. Because when you no longer abandon yourself, the world gets the message. This one is not here to be used. You become harder to manipulate, harder to exhaust, harder to guilt, not harder as in cold, but harder to convince that your worth lives in someone else's comfort. That's how you know the shift is real. You still care, you're still kind, but now kindness includes you. If this video changed something in you, write, "I accept my shadow." Make it your vow to yourself. This is only the beginning.